Open the pod bay doors.
Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the Cinematic Traveler Podcast. I am your intrepid movie-exploring host, Chris, and on this episode, we travel once again back to the 23rd century as we review the next film in our Star Trek movie series, the one I know you all have been waiting for me to talk about, and that would be Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, directed by William Shatner. Yes, Captain Kirk himself takes the reins of this film. How can it fail? Oh, let me count the ways. But I am excited to be talking to you about these movies once again, and I cannot wait to dive into this episode. But before I do, if you could do me a favor, whatever you're listening to the show on, somewhere on that screen, on that device, there is a follow button. If you could please click that follow button, I would appreciate it. It helps me and the show, but it also helps you. You get access to the latest episodes when they come out, as well as you get to go back and listen to previous episodes, hear my amazing reviews and my sexy, sexy voice. Also, you can follow me on my social media. I am on Instagram at Cinematic Traveler Pod. I am on X or Twitter at CMTPod. I am on Blue Sky. That one is at Cinematic Traveler something. And I have an email address, thecinematictravelerpod@gmail.com. So you have plenty of ways to follow me, get in touch with me, share the show with all of your friends, families, those damn Klingons. I don't care. Just share the show. Go on your social media. Let them know about it. Please help me as we build this Starfleet of podcasting shows here. There, I got through that quick, fast, and in a hurry, so we can get to this episode. Let me ask you how you doing, my beloved listener. If you have managed to make it this far into this series, you must be enjoying something that I'm doing, and I am grateful that you're here for this ride as we travel into one of the most controversial films of this 6-film series here. And as always, if you would like to hear the rest of my review, please meet me in the transporter room. Is everybody ready? All right, Mr. Scott, energize. Now, as I mentioned, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier is directed by William Shatner. Yes, he got to direct one of the movies because I believe way back in the 60s when they signed all of their contracts, there was something they referred to as the Favorable Nations Clause, that if Leonard Nimoy got to do something, then William Shatner got to do something. Who said actors are not petty? So they allowed him to direct this film coming off the heels of the massive hit that was Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Speaking of Captain Kirk, here he comes. Everybody quiet down. I think he has something to say.
Do you mind telling me what this is all about, mister?
Yes, sir. I am getting right on that. So with Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, we are back in the 23rd century. This time we start on Nimbus 3, the galactic planet of peace, where some guy is farming dirt or something. He's just digging holes out in the middle of the desert. I don't know what the hell he's doing. But at any rate, he is approached by Spock, played by Lawrence Luckinbill, a charismatic Vulcan, which seems like an oxymoron, with the power to take any person's pain away in exchange for them becoming a follower of his. After this brief introduction, we head off to Earth, where the USS Enterprise is in space dock, getting repaired from, I guess, some damage it got on its maiden voyage. I don't know, but Scotty's running all over the place trying to fix things, while the rest of the crew are out on much-needed R&R. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are camping, with Kirk doing some rock climbing, or I should say Shatner's stunt double, but at any rate. And after a round of row your boat, Yes, I know. I know. I know what you're thinking right now, and I agree. All right. Well, their trip is interrupted as the Enterprise is being sent to Nimbus 3 to rescue hostages that Cybok has taken. Now, faster than you can say William Shatner's girdle, our heroes are trying to rescue the hostages, but fail miserably, and Cybok takes control of the Enterprise. Now, he isn't looking for revenge or some planetary domination. No, he wants to travel to the center of the known universe to find God. Well, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, they try to get control of the ship from Cybok and not go on this dangerous mission, as well as avoiding a renegade Klingon, Captain Claw, played by Todd Bryant, who is trying to prove that he is the ultimate warrior by blowing up the Enterprise. Now, before any of that can happen, they do reach this mysterious planet called Shakari, where God resides. After a bit of a confrontational conversation, God realizes that he is no match for the power of Kirk, and the film proves that following a charismatic con man who makes promises of ending all of your pain for unquestioned loyalty, even in the face of destruction, is not a good plan. Who says Star Trek is sci-fi and doesn't relate to modern problems? I will never say that. But that wraps up my plot synopsis for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. So let's move on so I can give you the best review of this film in all the podcast universe, nay, in all of the universe. Now, if you are new to the podcast or if you haven't listened in a while, I do break my reviews down into 3 segments: the good, the bad, and the nitpicky. The good are the things that work for me in the movie. The bad, obviously things that don't. And the nitpicky, these are things that are neither good nor bad, sometimes just Hollywoodisms, or maybe even silly things my weird little brain picks up on that makes me laugh. And as I am trying to do with this podcast, I'd love to make you laugh. Because if there is 2 things I like to do on this planet, one is to question God, and the other is to make people laugh. And you thought William Shatner had a large ego. Ha. All right. So let's go ahead and move into the good. And I don't know how long this will take. I will say I like the villain of this film, Cybok. I think he's actually the most interesting character in the film because he's not your typical villain. Like I said, he's not out for revenge or to, take over a planet or kill Captain Kirk or something like that. In fact, he doesn't want any violence at all. He just wants this starship so he can prove that he's right about finding God. And then at the end, when he realizes, no, he was wrong and this is just another alien trying to kill everybody, that he accepts that he's wrong. He's like, hey, this is my fault, and he tries to save the day. So again, I think it was an interesting take on this character. And I will say, I forgot to mention that I don't really give a retrospective of the film in this review, but I will touch on a few pieces of trivia that I thought were pretty cool. One of those being that they actually approached Sean Connery, to play Cybok, but he chose to do Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade instead. Probably the better choice. Sorry, dear. I have to work with Harrison Ford. But they actually named the planet Shakari after Sean Connery. And while it would have been fun to see Connery in a Star Trek movie, I do dig Lawrence Luckinbill's performance here. I think he really sells this charismatic character who turns out to be Spock's half-brother, and he's this Vulcan, but he doesn't act like a Vulcan. He's embraced his emotional side, and he is definitely on a mission to find God. But like I said, he adds more to this character than what he could have been. He could have just been this maniacal, evil person, taking over the ship and do this. But he has that power where he can take away someone's pain, and that makes them follow him, no questions asked. And you can see why, because he's promising all of this amazing stuff that if they find God on this planet, they're going to basically get everything they want, I guess, like the Wizard of Oz. And he does really sell that performance. I kind of think I would follow this guy at certain points. And another piece of trivia about Lawrence Luckinbill, I think that's how you say his last name. He is actually the real-life son-in-law of Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. And why is that important to all you Star Trek fans out there? Some of you know the answer to this question, but back in the 60s, Lucy and Desi had a production company called Desilu, and they were the ones that took a chance on the original Star Trek series. So there you go. Without I Love Lucy, there would be no Star Trek. So I thought that was a pretty cool connection that he was their son-in-law. And as I mentioned, he has that ability to take away someone's pain. And for the longest time, you don't really know what that means until they have this scene on the Enterprise after Kirk, Spock, and McCoy have been captured while they're trying to escape and stuff. And Sybok comes in and he takes away McCoy's pain. And again, I think that was something that was really interesting in the movie because you actually get to see more of the history of these characters that we have known for so long, but also you get to understand how powerful this talent that Sybok has is and why people would follow him. He has McCoy who has to, oh my God, McCoy's is, I think, the worst, to be honest with you, because he goes in and it's his dad is dying and he's in a lot of pain. And as McCoy is a doctor, his dad's like, please just stop the pain. Just stop the pain. Don't let me suffer. So McCoy does that. He basically, I guess, the Star Trek version of pulling the plug, and his dad dies. And then you find out quickly after in some dialogue that they found a cure for whatever his dad had. So if he'd have just waited a little longer, he would have saved his dad. But it was brutal to watch, but you can understand why someone would follow Sybok after that. And it does lead to my next positive of the film. Most of the performances are pretty good. I think, speaking of Bones, DeForest Kelley, I think he does another great job here. Kind of the unsung hero of this movie. He's that crotchety old Bones, but he's got all of his smart-ass lines and his back and forth with Spock. And they have some good moments. Plus, he does get that scene that is very instrumental in not only explaining to us as the audience what's going on, but to give us more background into Bones. These are things that we didn't know about him from earlier, and it just adds more to his character. And you can tell he's playing it just as straight as possible. He's really invested in that moment in the film. And it was really cool to see him give that kind of performance that we haven't really seen in any of these Star Trek films up to now. Leonard Nimoy, of course, he's Mr. Spock, and he does his typical Mr. Spock performance. I mean, Leonard Nimoy at that point could do this role in his sleep. But again, he has his back and forth with DeForest Kelley. He also has some good moments with Shatner. I like after they get up back from the camping and they're on the elevator going up to the bridge, and Kirk's like, I need a shower. And Spock looks at him and goes, yes. I just thought that was a funny little moment. But he has his funny moments, and he also has his issues because this is his half-brother. So he has to make decisions on where his loyalty is. Is it with Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise, or is it with basically his blood, his family here? He's got his half-brother. And going back to the moment in the movie where you see Sybok trying to take away the pain from Bones, and then he moves to Spock. And I think that's sort of the moment with Spock where you're like, okay, he is full in with Kirk, because Sybok shows Spock's birth. And for those of you who don't know, with Spock being half human and half Vulcan, him and his father didn't get along. So in this birth scene, his father's like, oh, he's so human. Well, in the original series, there's an episode where they kind of have that issue and then they resolve it by the end and they become father and son again. Well, Sybok doesn't know that because he had left by the time that it happened. So he tries to use this, but it doesn't work on Spock because obviously he is reconciled with his father. So it kind of shows him, all right, this is not my family. Kirk and McCoy and the Enterprise, that's my family. So again, Leonard Nimoy, he is Mr. Spock, so I mean, it wasn't that hard for him. I will say there are moments in this film where the rest of the crew has a moment here and there. You have a little goofy comedy bit at the beginning with Sulu and Chekhov, who are lost. They're out in the woods and they're lost on their vacation or whatever, and they're pretending not to be lost, so they have to act all goofy, and Sulu gets to fly the shuttle around and stuff like that. So he has those moments. Let's see, Chekhov gets to pretend like he's the captain of the Enterprise when he's trying to negotiate with Sybok for the hostages. Uhura gets to do a fan dance out in the middle of the desert for some reason. Yes, I know. God damn this movie. Anyway, But she has her moments. And apparently, Nichelle Nichols is a very talented dancer and singer. So she was up for doing that in the film. The only thing that upset her was that I guess she had done the singing on the scene, but they overdubbed the voice from someone else, and that kind of pissed her off. But at any rate, Mr. Scott, he gets to run around and try to put things together, and he has his moments. So your crew gives what you would expect from in this Star Trek adventure. There is one last cast member I haven't spoken about. That, of course, is William Shatner. And while I will say this is not his best performance in these movies, it's still a good Captain Kirk. This is actually his most Shatnery Captain Kirk performance. What does God need with a starship? Spock! That's my terrible William Shatner. Spock, my crew. But he has his moments, but not as much as you would think. I mean, he did direct the film, and he's got a huge ego, so you would think he would be forefront of this movie, which, he's injected the things that he has passions for. He's apparently a very active man. I guess he is. He's in his 90s now, and he's still out there running around doing stuff. But that's why they incorporated the mountain climbing, although that was his stunt double. And they also do some horseback riding, and he's big into horses and stuff. So he got to incorporate his William Shatnery stuff in here. But, he doesn't dominate the movie. He has a few moments where he's kind of the butt of the joke. So he isn't above that at all. So it's just basically your typical Captain Kirk performance here. I don't think anybody acting-wise is terrible in this movie. They either range from serviceable to, like I said, with Luckenbill, I think he does a great job in this movie. And that's sort of one of the better things in this movie to watch is his performance. But overall, I think the crew does a good job. As far as Shatner's direction, I will say this movie is well-paced. It comes in at an hour and 46 minutes, and it flies by. I mean, it seems like you're meeting Cybok, and then the next thing you know, they're on the planet asking God, why? Why does God need a starship? So I don't think I ever really got bored in this movie. Watching it again, it's been a while since I've watched it, but I never kind of got like, oh God, when are we going to get there? It was like, okay, let's move on to the next scene. Oh yeah, all right. So, I mean, it's a workman-like direction. How about that? And another behind-the-scenes thing, I'm sure you're well aware that George Takei does not get along too well with William Shatner, and he actually turned down coming back to the Star Trek movie when he found out Shatner was directing. However, he changed his mind, and he has said that despite his feelings towards Shatner personally, he found him to be a very good director who would listen to suggestions and didn't let his ego get in the way and was very cooperative with the actors and everything and made the whole set an enjoyable place to be. So there you go. There's some high praise from George Takei. So I don't think the movie is horribly directed from a visual sense, but we will move into the negatives or the bad. And where Shatner does fail as a director here is, I think the tone of this movie is just, it's all over the place. You have, I guess they were trying to follow the humor that came with Star Trek 4, so they wanted to inject it into this film. However, whereas Star Trek 4, yeah, there's some goofiness to it, but it's played as that, like I said in the last review, the fish out of water. So there's going to be some goofiness to it, but it all works. Here, it's just played for goofiness to play for goofiness. I don't know. A lot of it is just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like I said in my plot synopsis, oh, the row your boat. Oh my God. Even now, as much as I was trying to be kind to this movie, when that scene hits, I was just like, oh God, please. Who thought that was a good idea? I guess they were trying to show him Bond, but come on. Give me something other than row your boat. And I talked about the goofiness of Uhura doing her fan dance out there when they're trying to distract the guards at the gate of the little city that's been taken hostage. It's just dumb. What else? I mean, when Scotty turns around and bangs his head and passes out in the middle of the hallway, when he goes, I know this ship like the back of my hand, and it hits his head. That would have been funny, except the way that it was filmed, because he doesn't say that and then instantly turn and hit his head. He almost takes like 2 steps and then hits his head. And it's like, he would have seen that. It's just not, or all the shit with the, oh my God, where he falls, where Kirk's climbing the mountain, then he falls and Spock saves him, and the God, the terrible green screen and the jokes they're making. It's just none of the humor. Well, I shouldn't say none of the humor. That's a bold statement. I think there are a few times, like I said, with DeForest Kelly, I think he's funny throughout the movie. There's a couple other little things. I like when Kirk sits down in his new captain's chair and he's just kind of grumpy looking, and they ask him, "What's wrong?" And he goes, I miss my old chair." That was kind of funny. But there's a few comedic bits that land, but a lot of it is just played too goofy to really be enjoyed. In fact, most of it you're just rolling your eyes at, but it has that tone in the movie and it's throughout. So you'll have that, and then you have this really serious theological movie here where someone is going, okay, I'm going to this place where I believe God is, and we're going to go talk to God, and the magnitude of what that would mean for the universe if this guy is right. And what it would mean to, in the people in the movie, that this guy is right. He did take us here, and the villain wins, basically, if he'd have found God. And it's just this serious, thought-provoking thing about that, or following someone who's charismatic, even though you're heading right for the wall, you're still just going to let him drive the car, you know what I mean? And William Shatner's inspiration for the film was televangelists and how people follow them, and that's kind of what Spock is. He's, like I said, he's charming and charismatic, and he can take these people pain away in the promise of this big delivery. And when that doesn't happen, what happens then? And that's a pretty good idea for a movie, to be honest with you. And you can make a really good Star Trek film out of that, especially with Luckenbill giving such a great performance to Spock. But then when you add that in with the goofiness of the humor, you don't know what you're supposed to be feeling at moments in the film. And it just is sort of like herky-jerky, where you're like, okay, we're doing stupid comedy now. Oh, now we're doing something serious about, McCoy's dad dying. Oh, no, now we're going to have a laugh at this. And then you have the action part of it that they mix into the tones of this film, which is not that great. I will explain something here in a minute. I'm going to start with the Klingons, because they feel like they were just tacked in for a reason to have a bird of prey at the end of the movie, that so Spock can kill this dangerous alien from the gunner seat. Because they're really pointless throughout the whole movie. And then at the end where he's like, "I'm sorry, I tried to kill you." I was like, oh, God. That's another moment where I'm just like, oh, who thought that was good? So, yeah, they were really pointless. And they're supposed to add tension to this film that really didn't need it, because you have the tension of basically the Enterprise being taken over by this quote-unquote madman. So everything with the Klingons for me just doesn't work. And the other thing with the action that I was about to talk about is the fact that it kind of ignores the age of these actors, which is really disappointing because of what has led up to this, especially with Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, there was some action in there, but for the most part, it didn't treat these characters like action stars. It let them be these middle-aged people that they were. They're not going out there getting in fistfights and jumping off of things and climbing mountains and all this shit. They know their role, basically. But in this movie, it just completely ignores all that. You got Kirk, like I say, he's climbing that mountain, and then when he goes to rescue the hostages, he's riding horses and he's fighting stuntmen who are jumping on him, and he's throwing them around, and then the cat lady jumps on him and he throws her into the pool table, which is actually a pool, which, God, again, one of those things that maybe somebody else said, thought, oh, that'd be funny, and it really doesn't work. But when you have followed the cast through the first 4 movies and you see them like this, it feels off. It's like, okay, I'm not really signing up for some big action flick here, and I'm not buying Captain Kirk doing all this stuff. Maybe 10 years ago, okay, but after everything that happened in the first 4 movies and how it did deal with these characters aging into their roles, to see them sort of take a step back into pretending like they're 20-somethings again, it just really doesn't work for this film. The other negative to the film, it looks really cheap. They could not use ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, because they were working on Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, as well as Ghostbusters 2. So they had to go with a different special effects company, and you could really tell the difference. Everything looks just cheap. It looks almost like it was filmed for a TV show. They reuse a lot of shots from different movies. The sets are kind of generic. I mean, you have was it Nimbus 3 is a desert planet. And then when they get to Shakari, which always makes me laugh because Cybok gets out of the shuttle and is like, it's paradise, and it's just the same desert I saw on Nimbus 3. And there was supposed to be more to the end of the film, but it had to get edited because they didn't have the money for the special effects. And the stuff that they were going to do there's supposed to be this moment where Kirk has to fight like these rock monster kind of things, rock monsters. And they said it just looked so bad that they had to cut it out because they didn't have the money for it. Because for some reason, this movie's budget was cut down significantly, which is weird because the previous movie was a big hit. But I think it had something to do with Star Trek The Next Generation was starting its run, and they were spending more money on that. So I don't know how much of that. I mean, it has to affect the movie in some way, shape, or form because, you're having to cut corners here and there. However, if you ever go and look and see what all Shatner wanted to do with this movie, part of you is like, well, maybe it's good that they didn't have the budget because I wouldn't want to watch Captain Kirk fighting rock monsters. Rock lobster! But yeah, it's just especially after Star Trek 2 and 3, this one looks really cheap. And then going into Star Trek 6, when ILM comes back, yeah, you can really tell the difference here. And my final real negative for the film, even though I can go on and on and on, is that really it's just a disappointing follow-up to Star Trek 4 and where Star Trek was at that moment. Because I remember going to see this movie with my friends, and we were all excited because here was this film that was gonna, you were done with all of the stuff from Star Trek 2, the Genesis trilogy. So now we're going to get into new adventure with a new Enterprise, and we were all ready to see what was going to happen. And then you get this sort of, I don't want to say scrapped together movie because, like I said, it does flow pretty well, but it's just tonally all over the place. It's too goofy. And it's, you got the serious stuff that you enjoy, and then it's got all this other shit around it that doesn't work. And you just left the theater like, oh, well, that didn't work at all. And really, this movie almost killed Star Trek films because they weren't going to make another one after that. But then I think, and we'll get to that with Star Trek 6, that was on the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, and they really wanted a movie in the movie theaters for that celebration. But we'll get to that movie momentarily. But overall, yeah, it was disappointing for fans, and in the financial sense, it was a bomb. Again, this is another thing behind the scenes. Harv Bennett, the producer, said this was a miscalculation because they did move this movie where it was going to be released in its usual time slot around Thanksgiving, which if you're not in America, that's around November. But they moved it to the summer of 1989. Now, for all of you film fanatics out there who know your history, there were some movies that came out in 1989. I've already talked about one of them, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which we all thought was going to be the final Indiana Jones movie. And now looking back, we all wish it was the final Indiana Jones movie. But naturally, that's got a big following, so that got released. I mentioned Ghostbusters 2. Star Trek 5 came out the same weekend as Dead Poets Society. And there was another movie, let me see if I can remember the name of it, that came out in 1989. I remember it being a small little independent film that not many people were talking about before it came out. And then it became a pretty big hit. What was it called? Let's see, it had Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton. And I know I'm dragging this joke out a little too long, but that's right, Batman came out that year, which was a juggernaut, especially through the summer. So while I'm not saying Star Trek V is a good movie, but it did get lost in the shuffle of that summer. And perhaps if they would have moved it back to November, it would have done better financially, and it would also give them a little more time. Who knows? Maybe ILM could have done some touch-up work, or they could have worked on the script a little more or something. They'd had maybe another month or two that they could film that would have been a little better. But at any rate, it was facing a lot of peril before it even got released. So yeah, it was disappointing all the way from top to bottom. And another little piece of trivia before we move to the nitpicky, William Shatner did learn from his experience as director of Star Trek V, and subsequently, every Academy Award-winning Best Picture was ghost directed by William Shatner. I bet you didn't know that. Yeah, it's true. It's true as far as you know. Of course, I'm kidding. Let's go ahead and move into the nitpicky. Now, these are things, again, that are neither good nor bad, just sometimes Hollywoodism or sometimes silly things my brain picks out. Speaking of that, I did laugh when Cybok goes to the first guy, the guy out in the middle of the desert, and he's like, show me your pain, let me inside and I can find your pain. And I couldn't help but think, yeah, Cybok would be fucked up if he got inside my head. I would be like, come on, Cybok, give me your best shot. He'd be like, whoa, that's we're too far gone here. I'm sorry, sir. You just go on about your business. Never mind. You've got some really dark areas inside your brain. See, I would have beaten Cybok within the first 5 minutes of the movie. Speaking of that scene, I am going to move into my next nitpick for the film. This one, to this day, when I watched it the other night, I'm like, what the hell? And I talked about this in the plot synopsis. What the hell is that guy in the desert doing? Somebody, please. I know you Star Trek fans know more about it than I do. What is he doing? He's digging holes in the middle of the desert. That's his property, too. He's going to defend his property. What is it? It's sand. He's digging holes. Is he harvesting something? What is it? It drives me crazy. I wish they'd have had one line of dialogue to tell me what he was doing out there. Because to be honest with you, if my whole existence was standing in the middle of a hot desert digging holes, that guy could have offered me anything. And I would have, he could have been like, I'll buy you a Coke if you follow me to this forbidden planet. I'd be like, okay, sure. Just get me the hell out of this desert. And my final nitpick, this isn't even a nitpick. This is one that me and Captain Kirk, yeah, I understand you, buddy. I understand you. Because there's the moment where he falls off the mountain and Spock saves him. And at the little fire, they're eating their dinner. And I think McCoy asked him, well, weren't you afraid? And Kirk's like, no, I wasn't afraid. And it's a very good sentiment, but I am going to take this in a very bad way. But he says, I know that I'm going to die alone. And he tells them, you guys were here, so I knew I wasn't going to die. And then I went, yeah, Captain Kirk, I get it. Yeah, me and you, buddy, we know we're going to die alone. Which made me even sadder as I was watching the rest of this movie. So overall, my final verdict for Star Trek V, and I know it is so tough for me to hate this movie. Just to let you know a little bit about myself, I am sort of the guy that roots for the underdog. And I know how this film is treated among the first 6 Star Trek films, and it's the worst one, and everybody hates it. And I always go into it thinking, no, this time I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I think as I have aged, I'm not as harsh as I was when I first saw it. And now that we had all of the Star Trek The Next Generation crew, when they did all their movies and how terrible, they are all horrible and they're much worse than this film, I don't feel the hate for this one that I used to. I see the ideas that were there, and I see some really good performances, and I think, God, if they could have just found the right path to take with this film, it could have been a fun little Star Trek adventure. Instead, it's just all over the place. It's goofy. The action sucks. And, although it does have one of the best quotes in all the Star Trek movies, I've said it already, but any Star Trek fan knows, what does God need with a starship? A great line, a great moment in that movie, because they sell it pretty good. But ultimately, I do have to agree, it is, of the first 6, it is, I don't know if it's the worst or the next to worst, and I will list them in the next episode. Actually, the next episode, when I get done with my review, I will give you the ranking order for each one, and then I'm going to give you another one where I'm going to rank what order you should watch them if you don't know Star Trek or don't like Star Trek. But at any rate, this one's going to be down near the bottom. I don't think it's that horrible of a watch, because like I said, it does move along pretty quick. But then when you get done with it, you're just sort of disappointed in what it could have been. So yeah, I am going to kind of go along with this being one of the worst of the first 6 movies. I would probably not point any of my friends who don't know anything about Star Trek towards this movie. However, it might not be as low down on my list as you think it will be. So you'll definitely have to come back for the next episode to find out. So that wraps up my review for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. And Mr. Shatner, I know you're listening. I apologize. I apologize for anything I said negative to you. You know I'm your biggest fan. Just go out there and keep directing all of those Oscar-winning films that you have been directing quietly behind the scenes and letting other people get credit. That is very noble of you, sir. So if you are still listening, then I must have done something right. And if I did, if you could please, again, follow the show, leave me a rating, a review. I'd appreciate that. Follow me on my social media. Do I need to say them again? How about just the Instagram at Cinematic Traveler Pod? And if you are a new listener, I also do reviews for newer movies. I usually do one that has been released in the movie theater, and I have those reviews up on Sunday, usually Sunday evening. And then I usually do a streaming surprise review sometime in the middle or towards the end of the week. So you can come back and listen to those episodes as well. I'd appreciate that. I am also on another podcast where I co-host. We do reviews as well, but those are spoiler filled. I will let you know the ones I do solo. I try to avoid spoilers, but I'm on Just Go Watch, and I have two co-hosts, and we do spoiler filled reviews. So you got plenty of ways to listen to me and enjoy my amazing wit and incredible reviews. And before I go, I want to thank you once again for taking the time out of your day to listen to my show. I tell everyone I know I've got the smartest and sexiest audience in all the podcast universe, and you never fail to live up to those high standards. And as you are traveling around on this blue and green ball, avoiding con men trying to ruin your lives and make you think they're doing you a favor, not thinking of anybody in particular, I need you to do one thing for me. Live long and prosper.